Good morning, my YouTube viewers. Palestine here. Welcome to my channel. I am making my video from my kitchen today, and if you notice, I don't even live modestly. I mean, if I was living modestly, I would have a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen, and a living room. And I don't even get a living room, so I don't even consider that I'm living modestly. But this is my humble home that I've been living in for close to 19 years. And I've been living in this apartment complex for 26 years. And I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep on living here because I have to walk upstairs to get to my apartment. But that's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm making this video. This video that I'm making is I just want to tell you why I don't feel safe around mental health workers. And I tell everybody I don't feel safe around mental health workers. And that's actually extended to medical professionals, but we would just call it mental health workers. And the reason why is because all my life I've been told I was mentally ill, which I'm not. I don't consider myself to be as mentally ill as a lot of people. I mean, I may have a mental illness, but I don't think that it's as bad as the label that I've been given. I think that a lot of my mental problems are to do with extreme neglect, because if you watch my videos, then you'll know that my mother and my father, they didn't want children, and so I was subjected to extreme neglect as an infant and a child. And I think that has affected my personality, but I don't think that I have the mental illness that the UK government says that I have. I think that I've been given this label of a mental illness for their efforts in covering up criminal activity to do with financial fraud and some other things. I've got some other videos that I would like to make about another topic that would be very interesting indeed. And obviously, because I'm the victim, I'm on the outside, the victim, the one that's being persecuted. So I can't tell you everything that people are doing because I'm the one that's being victimized. The only thing that I can do is I can tell you my perception of what they're doing because they have victimized me. And so that's why I just tell you what I think. I can't give you any facts. I can't say, well, I did this. I can't give you the facts because I'm on the outside looking in and I'm the victim. I'm not the perpetrator. I'm the victim of a crime. So, all this mental illness malarkey started like with my not my Scottish boyfriend, with my ex-husband, and I haven't talked too much about him, but I will. And so I had this boyfriend who was mentally ill, and he would tell me that I was mentally ill. I think that when people tell you that you're mentally ill, I think it's a form of abuse. People shouldn't be telling you that you're mentally ill. I mean, it should be for a doctor to make that decisions, but I don't feel safe around doctors either. And this goes back to my childhood. I had an uncle, because obviously my sister and I were neglected so bad we would tend to rock. And if you watch my videos, you'll see that I rock a little bit in my videos. And so my uncle said that children who rock are really seriously mentally ill. And he said that in front of me, and I don't think that I have the mental illness that people say I have. I think it's all a cover-up. It's all a cover-up to cover up the activities of other people. I will acknowledge that I've got issues like rocking, but I think that is to do with extreme neglect. And because they've gone into these orphanages in Romania and places like that where these babies don't get any physical contact and they'll sit there and rock. So that's what I think my rocking stemmed as. And even my Sikh friend who has a learning disability, he said to me yesterday, he said, "Are you autistic because you're rocking?" I don't know if I'm autistic. I don't think I'm autistic. I think it's comfort. Maybe it's a result of being neglected by my mother and my father. Both of them were culpable. And probably comforting, because I never got any physical contact at home because obviously my mother and my father didn't want children. And so I think it's more of a comfort thing. I don't know. And then psychiatric drugs also can give you Parkinson's. But I don't think I've got Parkinson's because one of the things about Parkinson's is that you lose your sense of smell, and I haven't lost my sense of smell. So I don't think that I have Parkinson's. So my rocking isn't anything to do with Parkinson's that I know of, because I haven't lost my sense of smell. So I've told you this background of people telling me that I was mentally ill. And also I had a Scottish boyfriend. He would tell me that I was mentally ill as well. And that's abuse. I think that's abuse. I mean, I haven't looked it up on Google yet, but I will look it up on Google. And I will pose the question of, if you tell someone they're mentally ill, is it abuse? And I think it's abuse to tell somebody that they're mentally ill. Because I know I didn't feel very good when my uncle and my Scottish boyfriend told me I was mentally ill. I didn't feel very good about that. And so we go up to when I was working at Foster Wheeler. I was just struggling along, trying to stay alive, being hopeful that one day I was going to meet this guy and he was going to take me out of this apartment and marry me and live happily ever after. Well, you can see that never happened because I'm 65. I do have a boyfriend and he's really nice, but we're not married and he can't take me out of this apartment. And the thing is I don't want to leave this apartment because it's safer than a lot of other places. And that's another issue for another video that I can make about things that were happening at Foster Wheeler. Okay, so I'm in Foster Wheeler and I made a grievance, which if you watch my other videos about my negative experience with law enforcement and my negative experience with ACAS. So I made a grievance, and then so what Foster Wheeler did was to try to cover up their criminal way that they treated their employees, me in particular, but I wasn't the only one. There were other people that they did this to. They said I was mentally ill. And then so, anyway, I got harassed out of Foster Wheeler, and you can watch my other videos and they'll tell you about how I was harassed out of Foster Wheeler. I have to be careful, like on the titles of my videos, not to use the name Foster Wheeler because I don't want somebody to complain about me and I don't want to lose my channel. So I say the name Foster Wheeler within my video, but with the title, I don't want to say the name Foster Wheeler within the title of the video because I want to keep my channel and I don't want Foster Wheeler to retaliate against me which they have done several times in the past. But I do have lots of videos that I would like to make on the subject, and anybody who is a social scientist or who is studying their master's degree or PhD in psychology or corporate crime or something like that, I'm an excellent case study, and you can definitely watch my videos and find out. And so they kept sent me this nasty letter saying, well, the first thing they did was they called me into a meeting with Human Resources, and the director of the department I was in told me that I was having a breakdown. And I didn't handle that very well. I should have just very calmly said, "Oh, really?" But I didn't handle that very well because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know that this was all a plan to want to harm me, get me out of the company, and make money out of the harm that they inflicted on me. So I didn't know what was going on when he told me I was having a breakdown, but that's what he did. He told me I was having a breakdown. And I definitely was nervous when he called a meeting because I didn't know what the meeting was about. I was just minding my own business. But that was all a plan. He should never have called me in to a meeting with HR and told me that I was having a breakdown. But it was all a plan to make it look like I was mentally ill because, one, the company was being sold to AMEC. AMEC had a different financial structure because Foster Wheeler had affiliate companies, and you had to have, and I was an affiliate coordinator, and you had to comply with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. But AMEC had a different structure, a different financial structure, because it was based out of London. So Foster Wheeler was on the American Stock Exchange, so we'll say New York Stock Exchange, and AMEC was on the London Stock Exchange. So they had a different financial system. Their stocks were on a different exchange, so they had no further need of an affiliate coordinator. Now, if they had been decent people, they could have found other work for me to do, and failing that, they could have made me redundant, but they didn't want to. They decided they were going to make a little bit of money out of this. And so they told me I was having a breakdown. That was the first thing I had heard about it. And then so they kept doing things. So they kept tampering with the computer system, because that's what I did. I did emails all day long. So they kept tampering with emails, which made it difficult for me to do my job. And they kept deleting files from the directory and things like that. And it was IT department was definitely involved in this, because they were deleting files from the directory. They were tampering with emails and all kinds of stuff to make it look like I was crazy. And I wasn't crazy. They were doing it through the IT department. And then so I made my grievance, and you can go back and watch my videos about the grievance. And then and I thought that when I made my grievance that the matter would be resolved. But of course the matter wasn't resolved, because Foster Wheeler was doing it. I asked them to phone the police. They weren't going to phone the police. They were doing it. They were behind it. They were trying to cover up what they were doing. And so they started saying that I was mentally ill, which, if I am mentally ill, I don't think I have the mental illness that they say I have. I'll just say that. Okay. And so I was forced out of the company, and I was a wreck. I was distraught. I was here in this apartment by myself, all on my own. no support. All my friends took Foster Wheeler's side. I mean, that should tell you what kind of friends that I had. They took Foster Wheeler's side. And when I was being harassed, one person who I still have contact with, but I don't really consider her much of a friend anymore, just said she didn't want to get involved. You know, she was supposed to be my friend and she was supposed to be supporting me, and she just didn't want to get involved. And so, so I went the first time that it happened, and it was all these crazy things were happening, and I want to make another video about that, about something else. But all these crazy things were happening, and I was being harassed. So I went to see my GP. My GP just said, oh, well, why don't you just move? Okay, so I'm a single woman on my own in the UK, no dependents, don't drive, and she's just saying, move. Well, it's a lot easier said than done, and I got upset. And she said something about drugs or something like that, and I said, you can't make me take drugs. And she said, yes, I can. She says, I can make you take drugs. And this was a GP. This wasn't a mental health worker. This was a GP. So GPs have a lot of power. And on another incident, later on, a GP did actually get me sectioned. So GPs have a lot of power, and they can get a person sectioned. And then so basically, I was really mad. I made a complaint about this GP, and I phoned up the office manager, and I said, I don't want to see this GP anymore. And she says, well, I'm going to put you down on our list because it's obvious you're not well, blah, blah, blah. Because I was crying and upset because I was the victim of a crime. And I was told that I was mentally ill for reporting that crime. And the medical professionals, yeah, they didn't support me. She just suggested I move. Well, if you're being harassed, if you move, they're just going to move the harassment to your new place. Yeah, you know, that's only common sense. So you've got to nip the harassment in the bud. And then so, that was my first instance. And then obviously, because Foster Wheeler was saying I was mentally ill because obviously they were covering up their corrupt business practices and the corrupt way that they treated their employees when they were no longer useful to them or when they wanted to make money out of them. And one, I was no longer useful to Foster Wheeler because it was being sold to AMAC. So I'm supposing that they had decided that they were going to have a different financial structure, and so they didn't need me anymore. And that because they didn't need me anymore as the affiliate coordinator, instead of giving me other work to do, such as a cost engineer, which I was more than capable of doing, or failing that, make me redundant, they decided that they would make some money off of my demise. And I do believe they took out financial policies on me for that purpose. So basically, one day I had a panic attack because people were also coming into my apartment and doing things when I was asleep. And I don't want to say what it was that they were doing because I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But they were coming into my apartment doing things when I was out of my apartment, like looking for a job or at work, or they would also come into my apartment in the middle of the night when I was sleeping and doing things. But I don't want to give anybody any ideas, so I'm not going to say what they did. And then, so one day I had a panic attack because I got no support. My friends were out living their life, having a good time. They weren't concerned about me, all on my own in the UK, in a foreign country, no family, no friends. They weren't bothered about me. And so one night, I guess it was on a Saturday night, I had a panic attack. And I thought, oh, well, next thing they're going to do is they're going to kick me out of my apartment. And then so I started ringing around trying to get some help about my getting kicked out of my apartment. I was worried I was going to be kicked out. And some woman picked up the phone and gave me a number to ring. I don't know if she was being helpful. I don't think she was being helpful. But the number that she gave me to ring was the crisis team. Because I'm worried about being kicked out of my apartment. And they're giving me the number for the crisis team. So I rang up this number that I didn't know it was the crisis team. Come to find out it was a crisis team. Well, after you phone the crisis team, they're never gonna let you go. You're gonna be in their radar forever. They're never gonna let you go. They're gonna get you a diagnosis of a very serious mental illness. And I think this incident occurred shortly after I had that bad experience with talking therapies. So if you want to go back and watch my video that I said my bad experience with talking therapies, this incident occurred shortly after that. Well, once you're in crisis team's radar, they're never going to let you go. They're going to make sure that you've got a diagnosis of a very serious mental illness, and that you're never going to have any credibility ever again as long as you live. Because if you have a diagnosis of a mental illness, or the police don't have to respond to you. If you're mentally ill, the police don't have to respond to you. So once crisis team gets you a diagnosis of a mental illness, you've lost all your credibility. And so that was the intention. Foster Wheeler's intention was to get me a diagnosis of a mental illness, so I wouldn't have any credibility and I wouldn't be able to say what they did, because they'd say, oh, well, she's nuts. See, look, it's not just us saying that, it's a doctor at Prospect Park. And then so naively, I phoned that number, and once they get your name and your number and your details, they're never going to let you go. You're going to have that diagnosis. They're going to get you a diagnosis. And so then what they did was, the following day, although I hadn't done anything wrong, I was the victim of a crime. They phoned me up and they said that they wanted me to go to Prospect Park for an assessment of my mental health. I was a victim of a crime. I hadn't done anything wrong, and they wanted to assess my mental health. I do, and then so I said, well, I can't go today because I'm seeing some people, and I don't want them to know the problems that I had. The problems that I was talking about was being harassed out of my job, being harassed in my home, people going into my home and doing things. That's the problems that I was talking about. But they just took it to mean my mental problems. And that's the problem with these mental hospitals. Every problem you have is a mental problem. They don't believe anything. They don't believe that you've been assaulted. They don't believe that people have come into your house and done things. They think that you have imagined it all. And so I think they forced me to go, the next day. So I went to Prospect Park, and I had to take the bus to get there. And so basically what I found to be strange was I wasn't even in Prospect Park. I was walking up to Prospect Park, and they knew who I was. They were calling my name. They knew exactly who I was. So why is that? Why did they know who I was when I was walking in the parking lot to get to the entrance to Prospect Park? yeah, they knew who I was. It was all planned, I do believe. Anyway, so they gave me a diagnosis, which I'm not going to say the diagnosis because I don't want to get anybody, I don't want to give anybody any ideas. And then and they prescribed me these really strong drugs, which I couldn't take because I collapsed. I mean, and they said, well, we're a home treatment team, so we're going to come to your home and give you drugs at home. So this nurse came to my home and drugged me at home, and I tried to take a bath, and I collapsed. I very nearly could have drowned in that bath. And so I decided, well, I'm not going to do this because I have to look for work. I was on job seekers allowance. I was supposed to be looking for work, and they were drugging me and telling me that I was mentally ill. And then so basically the CMHT came around, and I told them what happened. CMHT suggested that perhaps I imagined it. Well, I didn't imagine it because I've got documentation to prove that I didn't imagine it. And I got really upset. And then she says, well, you can request another support worker if you want, and left. Obviously, she realized that I had documentation, and I was really upset. I couldn't believe it. After I had poured my heart out to this woman, all these people, while I was being forced out of Foster Wheeler, if you've watched my video, like maybe my negative experience with ACAS, all these people, I poured my heart out to them, thinking they were going to help me. But of course, they weren't going to help me. They had no interest in helping me. And then so what I did, then they said they were going to put me into the CMHT, that's Community Mental Health Team, and I didn't want to see them. And I was very scared. I was still being harassed. I was still traumatized, still terrorized and everything. So I wrote a letter to David Cameron, and then if you watch my other videos, you'll know that, David Cameron is in on this scam. I wrote a letter to David Cameron and telling him what was going on. And of course, David Cameron knows full well what's going on, which I didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that politicians are corrupt. But I know now that politicians are corrupt. But he knew very well what was going on because Foster Wheeler was being sold to AMEC. And it became AMEC Foster Wheeler. Samir Brinko was the CEO of AMEC. Samir Brinko was pally with David Cameron, which I didn't know that. And David Cameron had awarded Samir Brinko some position in the UK government of like a business ambassador, going out and winning business and representing the UK. I don't remember the title that he was given, but it was in the news. It was in the news that David Cameron had awarded Samir Brinko this title to go out and win business for the UK. So David Cameron knew Samir Brinko. And so it was a big cover-up. They just wanted to shut me up. They wanted me to be quiet because when I was harassed out of Foster Wheeler, I was told I was not allowed to say anything about them as well. So Foster Wheeler just wanted to shut me up. And then so I wrote a letter to and the police definitely, I do believe that some, if not all, the police are being bribed by these big major corporations. And so the police didn't do anything. So I wrote David Cameron. I didn't know that David Cameron was friendly with Samir Brinko, and Samir Brinko was the CEO of AMEC. He became the CEO of AMEC Foster Wheeler. So they just wanted to shut me up. So David Cameron had me sectioned. And so when I got sectioned, I was given a diagnosis of a mental illness. I'm not going to say what that was because I just don't want to give anybody any ideas. And they forcibly drugged me. They subjected me to injections. And then I had to see a psychiatrist. And then basically, it's horrible. Once you get into the mental health system, it's horrible. They're never gonna let you go. You lose all your credibility. The police don't have to respond to you. The police don't have to listen to you. And so, yeah, once you got a diagnosis of a mental illness, your life is over. And so that's what they wanted to do. And then so I told you that Foster Wheeler, employees of Foster Wheeler had contacted my friends, said untrue statements about me to my friends. My friends didn't come to me and tell me what they said. They went and spread it around some more. That was exciting, They never came to me and said, this is what Foster Wheeler is saying about you. And so I put it on social media, some of the things that Foster Wheeler did to me, to include being assaulted by another employee of Foster Wheeler. But I have to be careful about what I say, because if I say the person's name, which I do know his name, and I say what he did, then I could lose my channel. And I don't want to do that. And then so Foster Wheeler found out because I posted it on social media, posted it on their Facebook page, as a matter of fact. So because, I've been contacting the police, I've been contacting Interpol, I've been contacting every organization that I could think of that would do something about it, and nobody did a thing. But all Foster Wheeler had to do was just pick up the phone and call the police, and they tried to have me arrested for what I posted on social media. And then so that meant CMHT was involved again, which I didn't want anything to do with CMHT. CMHT told me I had to delete everything that I had posted about Foster Wheeler, or they could have me charged with malicious communication. What about the malicious communication against me? What about what Foster Wheeler did to me? But because I posted on social media what Foster Wheeler did to me and what employees of Foster Wheeler did to me, they tell me I had to take it down or I was going to be charged. So I was so scared. I didn't want to be sectioned again. I was so scared. So I went and deleted what I posted. But it's the truth, even though I deleted it. I was intimidated. And I was forced to delete what I had posted. But it was the truth. And Foster Wheeler did all kinds of things to me. Employees, they had their employees do it. And so Foster Wheeler can say, it wasn't us, we didn't do it, but these employees did it, and Foster Wheeler's premises. So Foster Wheeler is vicariously liable. And because of the nature of the really nasty letters that Foster Wheeler wrote me, and those nasty letters have been removed from my apartment. Obviously, they went into my apartment when I was out looking for work, and they went through all of my documents, and they removed all of those nasty letters that had been written, and they replaced them with more moderately worded letters. But those letters were just evil that they sent me. And I think that those letters that they sent me were of such a hostile nature that they were trying to get me to a point where I would be so distraught that I would harm myself. That's what I think the purpose of those letters was. And they went into my apartment when I was out looking for work, I believe, and went through all my documents and removed those letters. So I can't even produce the letters as evidence. Say, look, see what they did. And then so going back to this incident where CMHT forced me, I did it under duress, to delete those posts. So then what happened was, then I was being harassed at home. I think that I'm not going to say my flat was being vandalized as well. I'm not going to say what exactly was done because I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But my flat was being vandalized, and I know that it was purposely vandalized because some things were missing from my apartment. These people had gone into my apartment and they had gone through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and so they knew everything that I had in my apartment. And one thing that I had, it was a tool that I could have used to repair something myself, had been taken out of my apartment. So I couldn't repair it myself. So I had to ring the maintenance company. And so I know that Foster Wheeler was involved in this, and I believe the neighbors were also involved. This happened in April 2018, and I believe the neighbors had been involved. I believe that either the neighbors had taken insurance policies out on me themselves because I live in a cooperative and I own a share in the cooperative. And in addition to that, whenever I moved in, I had to sign my name. So they got my signature. So Foster Wheeler had my signature. Where I live had my signature. And other places had my signature as well. And so I made a complaint to the police, and then if you watch my video about my negative experience with the police, you'll see it, but the police didn't do anything. The police didn't respond. The reason why the police don't respond is the police just put in your records that they believe you to be mentally ill, and then they don't have to do anything because the police are allowed to put their opinions in your records, and I found that out through the information commissioner when I complained. So the police didn't do anything. In fact, the police said they weren't going to respond to me. If I wrote to them, they would just file the letter away and not act on it. So the police are definitely being bribed. Some of them, if not all of them, are being bribed. They're being bribed by these big multinational corporations. And I believe that these psychiatrists and doctors are being bribed as well. Maybe they feel like they're not getting enough money, and so they're going to earn a little bit of extra money by saying people are mentally ill when they're not, or definitely don't have the mental illness that they say they've got. And then, so I got sectioned again because the neighbors were coming in. They were also tampering with medication. I think that it was the neighbors. It could have been the neighbors working on their own, or they could have been working with Foster Wheeler, and it was other people as well. But it was I believe it was the neighbors, because it had to be people who could come and go from this apartment complex without arousing any suspicion. So the neighbors, and I do know that where I live, they have my signature. So they could have taken an insurance policy or a financial policy out on me because they've got my signature and also own a share in this complex. But it wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't put it past them to be working with Foster Wheeler to do all this. And it was other people as well that I might talk about another time. And then, so basically, it was this doctor phoned up Prospect Park, and this church I went to, I don't go to that church anymore. And my neighbors, they complained about me and got me sectioned. And again, so I'm the victim of a crime. I'm the victim of a crime. And they're putting me in a mental hospital. And then when I was there, they gave me a diagnosis of another mental illness, which was more severe, well, in my opinion, more severe than the last diagnosis. And then it's just, and then they forcibly drug you. They drug you, and they forcibly drug you. When I was speaking to the psychiatrist, I asked him, I said, well, do you think I could have PTSD? No, they didn't entertain. They didn't care about my past. They didn't care about my upbringing with parents that didn't want children. They didn't care about my first marriage and what my first husband did. They didn't care about my second marriage and what my second husband did. They didn't care about Foster Wheeler. They didn't take any of that into consideration. Nope. They didn't believe anything I say. Once you get a diagnosis of a mental illness, you have no credibility. And so they didn't believe anything I said. And so now I've got a diagnosis of another mental illness. So 2 mental illnesses. And now they force me to see a community psychiatric nurse every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I had to go to Prospect Park and see a community psychiatric nurse until, number one, my CPN, that's community psychiatric nurse, went off sick. She was probably depressed, having to listen to everybody's problems. And then we had COVID. And then so when we had COVID, I didn't have to see them anymore because it was COVID. And that was good for me. I was happy I didn't have to see them anymore. And then they finally signed me off to the GP. So now I'm under the care of the GP. But I'm still being forcibly drugged. And I just don't feel safe. I don't feel safe around mental health workers. I feel that a lot of these psychiatrists know that the people who they were saying are mentally ill are not mentally ill or don't have the mental illness they say they have. I'm not saying that I'm not mentally ill. I'm very traumatized. So I can't say that I'm not mentally ill, but I don't think that I have the mental illness they say I have. And I think a lot of these psychiatrists are being bribed by multinational corporations. It's in their interest to say some people like me are mentally ill. And then in these CPNs, they have a lot of power. All they have to do is say you need an assessment, and they can ring the crisis team, and you can be forced to go over there and have an assessment. And if you don't go over there, then they can get you sectioned, which is what happened to me because I refused to go over there. So they sectioned me. I refused to go to Prospect Park to get an evaluation, and they sectioned me. So these mental health workers have a lot of power, and GPs have a lot of power because they can get you sectioned and they can get you forcibly drugged. So that's why I don't feel safe around any mental health worker or a GP really. And then whenever I go to because I know how they are, I know what they're like. If I go to a doctor's appointment, I ask my boyfriend to go to the appointment with me so he can be a witness to what was said during the appointment. Because so if they say that I said or did something, my boyfriend will say, no, I was there and that's not what happened. Because I've had this one CPN, the one that said that I imagined all that stuff that Foster Wheeler did. She said, no, she didn't say it. They'll lie. They will lie. These mental health workers will lie to save their own skin. They have a lot of power. They're easily bribed, and they will lie about the person that they're supposed to be working with. And so you just can't stand a chance. You can't. Once you get a diagnosis of a mental illness, your life is over because you've got no credibility. The police aren't going to listen to you. Nobody's going to listen to you. So I think that's it for this video. I've talked about why I don't feel safe around mental health workers and even GPs. These people have a lot of power. And these people are not above being bribed to say a person is mentally ill when they're not, or when they don't have the mental illness that they're saying that they have. So, and you can't beat them. You can't beat them. And because they work under a government system, you never, you're not going to be able to beat them, because you're going to be going up against the government. So just be careful. Stay away from mental health workers. And if you have to go to a doctor's appointment, bring somebody along with you to that doctor's appointment to be a witness. And just be careful. Be careful with mental health workers. And even GP, any health worker really can make a complaint about you and get you sectioned. So that concludes my video. I've talked about why I don't feel safe around mental health workers and other health workers as well. And so if you like my video, please like and subscribe. And I've got lots more that I would like to talk about, lots more that I would like to say, but some of my friends watch my videos and they don't know everything that's happened to me. And so I have to be careful what I put in my videos, because some of the things I don't want my friends to know. So thank you again for watching my video. It means a lot to me that you're taking an interest in my life, as pathetic as it may be.